What's up, guys? Today I had on a brilliant guest, Montague. Ty has been named one of the top 50 most influential creatives of the past 20 years, one of the top 10 creative directors in America, and Fast Company magazine named him one of the top 10 creative minds in business. Ty is the founder of Co-Collective, a growth and innovation accelerator that helps clients develop their business strategy and execute their brand story using the principles of story doing. Ty's book, True Story, is a blueprint for effectively using story doing to transform organizations to actually executing their higher purpose. He's also the host of the Calling Bullshit podcast, where he exposes companies that are purpose washing and discusses ways for them to transform into purpose-driven organizations. It was so fun and insightful to rap with Ty on the show. We talked about what purpose washing is and what all kinds of companies are doing out there. We called out some companies too. It was honestly a lot of fun. We could have gone on for hours and hours. If you like this episode, guys, please share with a homie, tag me on social, and definitely subscribe. It means the world to me. Enjoy the show. Ty, welcome to the show.
Sebastian, it's great to be here.
Pleasure having you on. Love having you on. Where are you at right now? I know that you have your agency in New York, but where are you located right now?
Yeah, right now I'm out in the wilds of Pennsylvania.
The wilds of Pennsylvania.
Little town called Damascus. Yeah, it's just across the. It's northeastern Pennsylvania, just right on the Delaware River. Very beautiful place.
Beautiful. You got to get away from the concrete jungle, right? You got to balance it out.
Totally.
Yeah. So Ty, I start all my podcasts by asking my guests this question. What was your last oh shit moment? What's the first thing that comes to mind?
Yeah, well, it's Pennsylvania related, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
About a week ago, we live out in the woods, and so there are a lot of ticks. And about a week ago, getting into bed, and my wife looked at me and was like, "I think you have something on your back." And of course, we examined it. She did. And it's like, oh, it's a tick. Oh, shit. That wasn't the real oh, shit moment, though. We got the tick out. And then a week later, like literally yesterday, I was in New York jumping into bed and saw a second tick. And so I was like, oh, shit, a second tick. You know what that means?
Uh-oh.
I am a tick magnet. And so that was my oh shit moment. Is I don't just get ticks, I get a lot of ticks.
Oh man, what do they do? This is like such an LA question to ask. What does it
do? Okay. Well, what they do is they burrow into your flesh and I guess consume your blood. But they also give you Lyme disease. And so
oh shit.
When you're removing a tick, you want to remove the whole tick with a pair of tweezers. Don't leave the head in there. And then they give you one dose of an antibiotic called doxycycline, and usually that works. Usually you don't get Lyme disease.
Got it. Okay, good. Yeah, that's definitely no shit. Yeah, I literally just said it now.
Right, and that concludes the medical portion of today's show.
Yeah, exactly. So for someone who hasn't heard this term, Ty, let's get right into it. What is the 101 of purpose washing? What does that mean?
Yeah, well, so we've been kind of in the helping clients develop purpose for quite a while now, about 12 years. And I would say we were not the first to the space, but I think we were a little bit early. I remember getting a lot of funny looks at first when talking to leadership about the idea of being a purpose-led business. It was a little bit lonely, and over the years it's become really popular. And now, it's like purpose is the new black. Everyone's talking about it. And, I think the watershed event was when Larry Fink started talking about it at BlackRock, because he's got, I think some insane amount of money, $9 trillion under management or something. So when Larry Fink talks, CEOs listen, and he started talking about purpose. And that means suddenly every CEO in the world is wondering about this and what it means and how to get one. And that to me raised the specter of purpose washing, like claiming that you have a purpose because everybody says it's really important, but not actually living it. And it's the living it part that really matters. It's the action that counts. It's using your purpose to as an operating system, both internally and externally for your company. And not everybody is doing that. And we wanted to make sure so that the word continues to have meaning for people, like it doesn't just turn into like a bullshit word. We
Yeah.
wanted to try and protect it and point out when we think companies are purpose washing, and then also feature talk about we have a podcast about purpose washing called Calling Bullshit. We want to talk about companies that are also getting it right.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about that for sure.
yeah,
Is
sure.
that when you first heard about it? Like, when did that first come into your existence in terms of like this
Well,
being a thing?
I became kind of tangentially aware of, I think the first thing I noticed was some companies that seemed to be purpose washers. We've done 2 episodes now on Facebook, and they've become kind of the poster child, but
That's
Facebook.
funny. I've literally got it in my. I was gonna ask you something about Facebook
Oh,
already.
yeah, no, I'm
Yep.
happy to talk about them
Yeah.
and
Yep.
any of the other companies we feature, but, the first one, I remember, just when Mark Zuckerberg made a big deal out of the fact that he was redefining the purpose of the whole company, and he said, "Facebook, exists to empower all of us to build community and bring the world closer together." And the company is manifestly doing basically exactly the opposite of that. And so that really got my attention. And then I started to notice a few more. And then I was like, well, it's important to start to talk about this. Otherwise the word ceases to have any meaning.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll make sure that we use that part. We'll cut a clip. We'll put it on Facebook and we'll see how much organic we get on it.
All right.
And hopefully we
Right.
don't get blacklisted
Yeah. See,
forever.
you know way more about this than I do. So I need to take your class.
Oh man, that's funny. So obviously you're an expert on the topic. If you were just to like estimate, like what percentage of large companies, big multinational logos are actually purpose washing, do you think? If you just had to
Well,
throw a number out of there, out of the blue.
all right. Out of the blue, I would say, well, here's the thing, and I really believe this. Being purpose led is a journey, right?
Yeah.
And nobody is perfect, right? Unilever is an example of a giant global company
Right.
that has been embracing the idea of purpose for over 10 years now,
Hmm.
almost 15, I think. And because of the size of the company, they're still not there. And in a way, they're never there. And so I ask everyone on my show to rate a company on what we call the BS scale, right? We actually have created an index of where a company exists from 0 BS being the best score to 100% BS being the worst score. And we ask everybody to rate them. And I also ask the CEOs of companies that are getting it right to rate themselves. And Alan Jope gave Unilever a 20 on the BS scale, which is toward the lower end, but it's not 0,
It's out of
right?
100.
It's 100 is the worst,
Got it.
0 is the
100.
best.
Right.
He gave
Okay.
Unilever a 20.
Yeah.
And so, even the CEO of the company is saying, well, we're 80% there, but we're not all the way there. And we've been trying to do this for 15 years. The key to not being a purpose washer is intent, though. You have to be
Mm,
trying to push your company in the right direction. So even
right.
if you're only 2% there or 5% there, but your intention is pure, you're really trying to actually make change, we're good with you, right? It's in
Love that.
companies that wrap themselves in a purpose that claim to be trying to make some positive change in the world, but actually aren't trying at all. Which is, I would say, the category that Facebook falls into, which is why I think we gave them like I think we gave them a 90. They're
Got it. Yeah.
90% BS.
That's so important, Ty, and that's something that I've spoken about in the past
Yeah,
with other great leaders of companies. That it's like at first you think that you have to do everything perfect in order to be a conscious business or a purpose led company, and it's like
yeah,
it almost becomes impossible, right, to do everything perfect.
yeah,
It's like when you look at certified B corporations, right? Like the score is out of I think it's like out of 200, but like you have to get I think it's like something like 75 or 80 to get the
even get in.
certification.
Yeah,
And it's like, right, it's like a journey, like you said. It's a journey
yeah,
with a true intent. You're trying to tackle as many things as possible. It's impossible to be perfect. but the intent is where it's at,
Yeah,
and
that's right.
doing it.
No, that's exactly right. So our word for the gap between word and deed is bullshit.
Yeah.
And so, when we do an episode of Calling Bullshit, we do the first half about the facts of the case. Here's what led us to believe that this company was a bullshitter, usually with an expert. And then we spend the second half of the show because we also really believe that it's a journey. And also we believe that bullshit is a treatable condition, right?
Mm.
The way you treat your bullshit is by taking positive action. And so we spend the second half of every show actually coming up with ideas to fix the problem because we really want to leave people in a positive place. The idea isn't to just shame companies. Like, we shouldn't be calling companies out and not giving them any hope. We should call them out and then say, these are the things that you would have to do to actually really do your purpose. And you can do this, right? Ultimately, we're trying to encourage people down this path, not discourage them, right? The more companies that are on this path, the better off we all are.
Yeah, I love that. Well, so let's just talk about it now, since you've
Yeah,
mentioned Facebook a couple of times. But basically, there's very many companies that are providing value to their customers because of the product that they sell or that they make or the service that they provide. And a lot of this times that requires, quote unquote, that company to maybe, hurt the environment or not have the best practices. Obviously, I think you and I would say, well, that's bullshit. There's a better way to do it.
that's right.
Some people say that there are necessary evils, right? So let's take Facebook, for example, right? Like, they'll do stuff where, like, they'll raise, like, $250 million for the ice bucket challenge or something like
Yep.
that. A very
Yep.
positive thing,
Yep.
right? But then there are false news, there's privacy issues, there's there's all kinds of accusations of affecting elections. I mean, there's just so much. So Facebook clearly, you've got this dichotomy, this sort of thing where it's supposedly bringing people together, but it's also pulling people apart. So do you find that there are instances that there are necessary evils, or do you think that there's really a way around it no matter what?
I think there are always compromises and trade-offs, right? So long as you're aware of all of your stakeholders, right? You are going to have to, at various times, make compromises between some of your stakeholders if you're leading a purpose-led business. You can't please all the people all the time, right? And that's the point of a leader, is to make those hard choices, right? That's what a CEO essentially is
Right.
for. And but it doesn't mean your overall intent has changed. And in fact, you have to be driven by that. You have to take those words and put them to work inside your company. So when Facebook says, we exist to empower everyone to create community and bring the world closer together, the problem that they have is their business model. It sits at the core of their business, right? Because Facebook makes money by mining your attention and selling it off to the highest bidder.
Right.
And it turns out that it is human nature to pay attention to things that are highly emotional, upsetting, polarizing. And so Facebook's algorithms, which are designed to attract as much of your attention as possible, essentially strip mine your human weaknesses and use those to trick you into paying attention to stuff that really shouldn't be all that interesting and definitely isn't bringing you closer to your community, as a way of selling your attention off to advertisers and maximizing their profitability. So to solve that problem, Facebook would need to address its business model, which is doable. They couldn't, they wouldn't, it would mean that they wouldn't necessarily be as big as they are.
That's
You know,
right.
right? And so compromises have to be made. And sometimes one of the compromises that you make is you decide not to grow as fast. or as make as much money. But often, all of the CEOs of purpose-led businesses that I have talked to have said, we believe that we're growing faster as a result of being purpose-led, that the passion and loyalty that people feel for us has actually improved our business, not hurt it. And so if you do it right, there are plenty of profits to be made in a conscious business.
Hey guys, I just want to remind you, if you want to find more content like this, you can visit sebastiannaum.com. That's Sebastian, Naum.com. You can also get a ton of other marketing resources from myself and my agencies, ranging from SEO to social media, influencer marketing, branding, web development, and more. Again, that's sebastiannaum.com. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the show. Absolutely. And I think that's the case probably for most businesses. I don't know if that would be the case for Facebook. I think that when you just said like they probably wouldn't be as big, that's probably the bottom line. They probably wouldn't be as big. They have to make money, right? So from an advertising standpoint, and obviously being in that business too, is, we are advertising for most of our clients are conscious businesses anyway, right? So we're just trying to get great products in front of people that would like to buy them. And I think that's where sort of the healthy side of the selling comes in terms of Facebook, right? There's no trickery. It's just like, hey, like if you're into buying, clothing that isn't fast fashion and there's a purpose behind it, yada, 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 I'm going to try to get that product in front of you. And that's where I think Facebook comes in. And that's great as a tool, right? Is to expand that message. But unfortunately, it seems like there's just no boundaries.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, if you're an entrepreneur and you're thinking about starting a purpose-led business, right? Like making sure that your business model and your purpose are aligned is really important. Because if they aren't, you're going to get yourself in trouble down the line. Like that's sort of the number one, I would say, litmus test if your business model is aligned with the purpose, it means that the more of your product or service that you sell, the better off your stakeholders will be. And if you can pass that test, you're well down the path.
Say that again, Ty. That was important.
The more if you can look at your business model and the purpose that you've defined for yourself and answer in the affirmative, like the more of our product or service that we sell, the better off all of our stakeholders will be.
That's right.
Then you are well on your way to building a successful purpose-led business.
I always say if by scaling your business, you're scaling good, that's where it's at.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Ty, Fast Company named you one of the top 10 creative minds in business. That's super badass. I want to ask you, what do you believe makes you creative? But before you answer that, I want to do a little side note because, just a little story about me. Like I was somebody that never considered myself creative, right? I, just because I didn't paint, sculpt, draw, or play the guitar like Jimmy Page, I was like, that I'm not creative, right? I was a sports guy. So I was like, oh, like I'm a sports guy. That's like the opposite of being creative, right? But the truth is that I was incredibly creative on the field. I would find ways to get open. I had great vision. I ended up being, like the top goal scorer all the time. And I had to be creative to do that. But that didn't, catch on. And then later on, I started businesses, some that failed, some that had great success. So I was creating in that realm. I still didn't believe that I was a creative. And it's funny. And now we are, I get to interview epic people like yourself here on my podcast. So now I'm creating in this realm. And it's just like, it's something that I've actually had to learn to remind myself that I actually am creative. And I think it's such an important thing, for people out there to really reevaluate, because it's something that people can actually sell themselves short and thus stunt their own growth.
That's right. Well, we're all born creative, right? Like just look around you at kids, they're always drawing or painting or making something or pointing out some weird aspect of the world that you never would have realized because they just look at the world differently. And then for some reason, the world convinces some of us that we're not creative anymore. And
Yeah.
that becomes our worldview. And if you view yourself as not being creative, you limit your potential,
That's
right?
right.
And I don't know how I made it through that gauntlet. But somehow I did, and thought of myself as a creative person, and wound up in advertising, honestly, because I dropped out of high school and I dropped out of college. I have almost no formal education. Advertising was really the only business that
So
would
wait,
take me.
you dropped out of high school, but you still went to college.
Yeah, I got my GED and went to college and dropped out
Yeah.
of college.
Okay,
And
got
so,
it. You were
it's like, "Take that,
consistent in the
college."
dropout.
I don't know why. I'm a
But
knucklehead,
you were
but anyway.
consistent on that.
What?
You were consistent.
Yeah, right, exactly, exactly. But I also think, in a way, that whatever that impulse was, and I'm not advocating that people drop out of high school or college. I'm just saying whatever that impulse was, like, I do tend to question the status quo, let's call it.
Mm,
That impulse runs deep in me, and
yeah.
and it held me in good stead as a creative person in the advertising business. And now, I'm spending a lot of time questioning some of the fundamental assumptions about capitalism, right? And
Mm,
and in a way, it's the same impulse, right? It comes from the same place. Is like, how do we break some rules and make the world better, you know? And capitalism has some rules that are just wrong, right?
yeah,
The current form of capitalism, I call it predatory
yeah.
capitalism, but um, and it just needs to be. It doesn't have to be thrown out. We just have to fix it. Um, so
Absolutely. And it's, in my opinion, it's sort of like the ticket, like the golden ticket to fix a lot of things that are wrong. If
oh
we
my
get
gosh,
capitalism
so many
right, it's
things,
the
right?
right, it's the way to fix so much.
I mean,
And
you're a young man. It took me way longer than you to figure this out. Like, that's the thing I wonder at, is like, man, why did it take you so long to get your head around this? It's interesting.
interesting. Yeah. So let me hit that again. So do you think so is being creative for you, it's rooted in questioning the status quo?
Yeah, questioning assumptions that people make. People go through life just living
Yeah.
inside the kind of current matrix, and
Yeah.
and it's I guess because that's the easiest thing to do, and for whatever reason, I tend to be a person who's like, but why? Why is it that way?
Yeah.
Does it have to be that way? Who who made the rule that it has to be that way? And that held me in good stead as a creative person, in the as a copywriter and a creative director in the advertising business, which I did for a long time. Um, but it's even better and more important now at the level of questioning the assumptions that capitalism has led us to make about the way society is structured, and who has power, and what we value, and what we consume, and why, all of those things.
I love that, Ty. I was excited to ask you that question, and I would have never guessed in a million years that the response had to do with questioning. And I
Mm,
love that that's what,
mm,
creativity definitely comes from questioning,
mm.
the status quo, from, why can't this be different?
Yeah,
And that could just be approached in anything. It could be in something as, sort of the typical creative, from it being art, right? You're questioning, why should something be painted some way, or why should I,
yeah.
create something that's way, to copywriting or an ad or whatever, to just the entire way that the world works in terms of capitalism. So love that. That was epic, Ty.
Thanks. Well,
So
feel my business partner's pain. Like, you'd hate to be my partner, trust me, because I do it at Co all the time too.
all the time,
It's I
why are we
can't
doing this way?
What?
Why are we doing this way?
Right,
All the
exactly.
time.
"Can we do this better? This sucks. Come on.
Yeah.
We could do better."
Would
So,
you would you call yourself a perfectionist?
Yeah, probably. I would call myself I am a bit of a perfectionist, which is a flaw, and that makes me kind of a pain in the ass at times. It's a thing that I'm working on, you know?
I
It's a process like everything else, right?
yeah.
You know, at least I'm aware that I have that tendency, and, it's something that is not necessarily good for me or for the people around me, and it's something that I need to get
Super
better at.
interesting, yeah. I call myself a recovering perfectionist,
Right, okay, that's a
and
good way to
so
think about it.
yeah, you feel free to use that one. But it's true because, in fact, like, I actually went through in coaching and, therapy/coaching or whatever, it's something that I've talked about a lot because perfectionism for me has been something that I noticed it was like covering so many aspects of my life. I was bringing my perfectionism into so many things, and that was incredibly destructive in so many aspects,
Totally.
right? And it's
Yeah,
just so destructive. But then it was like, but it's amazing in so many other aspects, right? It's why I've had success here, here, and here. But then
yeah,
here, it's breaking me apart.
yeah,
So it was
that's
like
right.
this sort of balance of, okay, where's my perfectionist eye a great tool, and where is
Yeah,
it hurting me, where I need to let it go,
yeah,
you
it's a
know?
superpower, but you have to know
Yeah.
when to deploy it, right? You
Right.
can't be running through every wall, right? You can't
Exactly.
be.
I think that probably goes along for most superpowers. Any
Yeah,
superpower can just be negative, right? To a
yeah,
certain
exactly.
extent, you know? So, let's talk about something that you talk about in your book, and I'm sure you talk about it a lot in your podcast. But storytelling versus story doing.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I spent a long time in the advertising business as we touched on already, and, that's definitely a storytelling business where, I'm helping companies define their narrative really in the world. What do they wanna be? How do they wanna be seen? And then I'm using paid media, 30 and 60-second commercials and print ads and social media to give the world that impression, and that is, it's very, very powerful and very, very effective because, you know, human beings are very, and I use this word advisedly, they're very vulnerable to a powerful story, like,
Yeah.
human beings use story, it's not a childish thing. It's the way we create meaning, in our lives is through story, and the story of who we are and what is important to us, and what we believe. Those kinds of stories are, life and death issues for human beings. This is very serious stuff, and advertising as an industry has learned how to hack that and use it, in ways
Right.
that are very effective and not necessarily bad in some cases, but in some cases, absolutely terrible. And so 12 years ago, I finally decided I'd had enough of that path held no heart for me, and I decided to start Co-Collective. And, I noticed, having been in advertising, that companies could tell one story and s actually be, some completely different thing. That the actions that a company takes can be completely misaligned with the story that it's telling out there in the world. And so I wanted to figure out how to bring those 2 things together, and I thought, well, if I could use the power of story, which is so universal in human beings, but instead of connecting it to a narrative, connect it to action, we could bring companies, story and doing, their actions and their words in line with one another. And, I did not invent this, like, I just noticed that there were some companies in the world who that were already doing this. One of the first ones I remember seeing was Starbucks, and, there was a moment where we all have experienced where suddenly it seemed like overnight there was a Starbucks on, like, every street corner,
Yeah.
but there was no Starbucks advertising anywhere. And they were when you pop the hood on that, what they'd done is really created a compelling experience. They'd really created this third space where, you could be in between home and work and get stuff done and enjoy a coffee and be with friends, And, they built a really big successful business doing almost no advertising at all. And so I started collecting companies, these story doing companies, as I came to call them. And that led to my discovery of purpose and being purpose led. And
Mm,
that led to Co Collective, really.
I love that. Yeah. Starbucks seems to be, by the way, I'm a kind of a coffee snob and I do not like Starbucks at all.
Yeah, yeah.
And they
I know
seem
there are
like
a lot of people who hate Starbucks now, actually.
yeah.
That's a big issue for them.
Well, yeah, and I was going to tell, here's what I wanted to just full disclosure, right? So I made these assumptions about Starbucks as being this like massive corporate company that grew
Yeah,
so fast. And then I actually don't like the taste of their coffee. So I was like,
yeah.
F Starbucks. But then I actually ended up learning that they're actually seem to be a really good employer. They give great benefits to the people that work
They do.
there.
They do.
So so they seem like a really solid company, and it looks like they're really they're trying to do a good job in terms of like the coffee that they get and doing it through conscious practices. So
Yep.
honestly, like they seem like an awesome company, and it's just a preference that I just don't like their coffee.
Yeah.
But for me, it was a good thing for me to notice that I had made that assumption that just because something was massive that it was bad
It had to be
capitalism.
bad. Yeah, right. And look, as back to the nobody's perfect and it's a process thing, like, Starbucks has gone through phases, like, when they got going, they really leaned into the idea of taking care of their employees. They were one of the only companies that hired temporary employees, but gave them full benefits. Back in the day, and so they really did some very progressive things as they got going, and that created a
Yeah,
really good reputation. But then, like all companies, they get big, and that creates unanticipated problems, and they've wrestled with that a few times over the years, but they're still trying, right? Howard
yeah,
Schultz, I mean, he just did another stint as CEO, and came in and has been working on rebooting the company yet again. And so they're still trying to do the right thing, and we'll see, right?
yeah,
They also, I would say, opened up a pathway that led to a whole bunch of opportunity for other coffee companies, because before
yeah.
Starbucks, like, none of those things existed. None of
Well, they brought the culture. They brought a
Yeah,
culture that was only
yeah,
European and South American into America, and then they made it, international.
yeah, that's right.
And now we've actually got some incredibly awesome specialty coffee chains that are starting to pop up,
That's right.
A lot of
Yeah,
Aussie companies and they're awesome. So
yeah.
um really cool. So let's just, for the fun of it, we may as well call some bullshit on some big guys.
Some
Just to
bullshit.
throw, just call some bullshit on a handful. Like I'm going to ask you, but I just wanted to ask you about this because the first thing that sort of I was talking to somebody before the show about, this conversation I was going to have with you, and I was like, man, like I really feel like Adidas is on some bullshit right now with the whole
Mm,
Kanye West thing, and
mm.
it's like they had to wait to get all this shit from people before calling off that massive partnership. Like that is some BS, right?
Yeah,
Like they had an opportunity to just right away drop it.
yes, yes. Well, so on our show, right, on the so yes, that is bullshit, and I wanna return to that, right? But it's not necessarily our kind of bullshit, right?
Right.
Because for it to be our kind of bullshit, they would Adidas would that action would have to be, out of line with what they say their stated purpose is, and I don't know what they say their stated purpose
Okay.
is. I haven't gone deep enough on Audi, but I assume
Okay.
that not being, um,
Well,
you know,
inclusive, not being inclusive
being
of
not
races, religions.
inclusivity has to be
Right.
a part of their corporate ethic these
Yeah.
days, and if it's not, that's a huge problem,
Yeah.
and not to put too fine a point on it, but this is a German company, and they should
I
have been the
know.
first ones to step away from this and go, "No, not on our watch," right?
Yeah.
"Not on our watch, yeah, you can't do that," right? But it took them a while, and
Yeah. It was like
that
2 weeks or
I
something.
it's
Yeah.
funny, I was talking to somebody this morning, and I think that is gonna hurt them with people. I mean,
Yeah.
you are not the first to have noticed it. I noticed it, a bunch of people have noticed it,
Oh
and
my
it's like,
gosh.
"Okay, that's gonna hurt them. That's gonna
Well,
hurt."
even just on the sales of just that shoe alone, which is like their most expensive shoe, I guarantee that's going to take a massive hit. I don't know how many people are going out and buying that shoe today, you know?
Yeah.
So, anyway, it's just, I just, sometimes it seems like such an opportunity served on a platter to do the right
Well,
thing,
that's the thing. It's
you
like
know?
how to what is it? Snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. It's like it was so easy. It was a layup. And
And
because it was
obviously it would have lost, I mean, a layup that meant losing lots of money,
it
but
would
they're
have
going to
cost
lose it
them
anyway.
money in the short term,
Yeah.
right?
And
In the
right.
short term, it would have cost them money, but it would have potentially built loyalty and therefore made them money long term, right? Because if you
They've
see a
now
company that
lost loyalty. They've
yeah,
lost
they
loyalty
have,
forever from a lot of people.
they have, and that costs money, right? They
Absolutely.
cannot yeah, I mean, look, it's a
Yeah.
tough the whole thing is a tough situation. I don't envy, the CEO, but that call should have been made much faster, and they would
Yeah.
have recovered from it much, much better than they will now.
Well, now you can imagine, like, they're probably going to have to implement all these campaigns to try to patch up. And it, right? Like, they're going to have to figure out all kinds of stuff to figure out a way to patch it up with the Jewish community. And it's just like, I don't know. It's going to take a long time. You know, it's just,
Yeah, no, I
anyway,
mean,
that was a good one.
this is our thesis. Action talks, right?
Yeah.
Nobody
Right.
cares about your words. Like, you can't there isn't a campaign you could do that's gonna, like, win people over, right? Like, you've got to just
Right.
when it's time to act, you have to act, and when people see that you did that and you did it right, you win their loyalty, and if you fuck that up, you know
Do you have do you have any other one that like comes to mind that's like right now is blaring at you that you feel like you want to call bullshit at?
Uh, well, just because I'm in the middle of season 2, I'm deep in a couple of stories. I
Uh-huh.
don't wanna say too much because we haven't dropped the episode yet, but I'm deep in McKinsey world right now. A new book has been published about McKinsey, by 2 written by 2 New York Times reporters, and, McKinsey is a big consulting company, and they claim to be purpose-led,
Right.
and they claim to, as a part of their work, be helping other companies become purpose-led, but when you pop the hood on McKinsey, you go, "Ooh, man, this company if it's a journey, this company is just getting started on that journey, like, they got some splaining to do." Um, so that's one, I would say. The thing is, most people don't know about it because they operate in almost complete secrecy. Like, culturally, they do not talk about the clients they have, and they don't talk about the work that they do. So in a way, it's a problem that most people it's a giant problem because McKinsey has, in many ways, influenced corporate America to create the form of capitalism that you see around you every day right now. Let's call it unconscious capitalism. In many
Mhm.
ways, that flowed from McKinsey, and people don't know
That's
that.
so interesting. Yeah,
Right?
they're a consulting firm. Why would people know that in general, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's a
Super
crazy one.
interesting. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, there were a bunch of companies that also they sort of stubbed their toe during COVID in various ways, but I think that was a hard time, in general for everybody, and so, obviously, mistakes were made. I think
Yeah.
this is the thing is, like, I try not to pick on companies that have the right intent and make a mistake, right? Like, mistakes are okay. Everybody makes mistakes. What we're trying to measure is what is your overall intent? Are you
Mhm.
trying to fool us into thinking that you believe all these positive things that you're saying that you stand for? Or are you actually trying to prove that you stand for these things through the actions that you take? And it's where we see that gap that we jump in there.
Super important. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I remember during the pandemic, I was on I was doing a lot of short videos in general and putting them
Yeah,
on LinkedIn and putting on
yeah,
LinkedIn and stuff. And that was one of the things that I was talking about consistently was like, this is an opportunity for companies to bite the bullet and do the right thing, give people their money backs, zero out their subscriptions, whatever it is. Like if you
Exactly.
do this now, when it hurts, they're
Yeah,
going to remember you later,
that's
right?
right.
Like you get through them with the hard times, they'll stick with you.
That's
And,
exactly
and
right.
yeah, that was definitely an opportunity for companies to do it when they were hurting the most. So do you feel like there should be like a set of rules, like a law in advertising against purpose washing? And like it's impossible to monitor it, especially for small companies. But let's say like if you had some sort of a rule for massive companies that had X amount of revenue a year or that have X amount of employees, right? Like your Adidas's and whatever, right? So these big Starbucks, whatever. So it's like there should be a rule that they can't go on national television and straight up purpose wash some BS story that's not true. Like that'd be an interesting thing to police.
100%
But
there should be laws. You see companies are now being sued for greenwashing. There are
right,
19 state attorneys generals right now who have filed suit against a number of companies, among them, I think, H&M, for making false claims about their, in quotes, sustainability. Um, I think there are some financial institutions that have been questioned by the SEC about their belief, they're creating ESG funds and whether those funds are actually ESG, really ESG compliant, or whether that's, greenwashing or bullshit. And
so
I
that's
think
great.
there should be more of that. I went further. I wrote a an op-ed in the Drum, which is a marketing publication, and generally I steer clear of marketing publications these days. But they asked me to write an editorial on anything that was on my mind, and what was on my mind was we have to curb the amount of consumption that is going on planet Earth, right? We are in a state that others have referred to as overshoot. We are currently operating from the consumption of we've overshot the planet's ability to replenish the raw materials and the energy that we are using on the planet. And we did that. We passed Earth's ability to replenish it in 1972. And every year we have increased our level of what is called overshoot. And overshoot is a thing that um, occurs often in nature. It's a very natural thing. Like a deer population, you hear these stories about like there are no deer on this island, but then a deer swims out, one deer or two deer swim out, and then suddenly they start multiplying on this island, and suddenly there are deer all over the island, and suddenly then they've eaten all the leaves, and then
Right.
suddenly all the deer starve, right?
Mm-hmm.
Overshoot ends the same. It means the deer overshot the carrying capacity of the island. And so overshoot ends the same way every time, which is the population of the species that has overshot the carrying capacity crashes back to the carrying capacity of whatever the environment is. And the environment for humans is planet Earth. And we have to curb our energy consumption and our product consumption. And it's kind of obnoxious to hear that from an ex advertising person. I will acknowledge that freely. And so the editorial I wrote in the Drum was entitled "Does Advertising Cause Climate Change?" Question mark. Actually, it's worse than that. And I go into overshoot and basically say advertising is a mechanism that we use to create this culture of consumption. It didn't exist before mass media occurred, and we have to consider banning most forms of advertising. Maybe informational advertising should be allowed. It's a thing. It does this. It's available here. But if we continue down the path of like, you know, live the Buick lifestyle or you're a loser, the kind of thing that makes you, gives you FOMO, makes you feel competitive with your neighbors, that kind of advertising that preys on people's psyche. If we continue to to goose consumption in that way, the future is bleak in my view.
Okay, we I could
Sorry,
now
I
sit here.
realize that's
I
kind
would
of heavy, but
I would be like, yo, let me send you a couple of beers and I'll order some and just talk about this for the next 3 hours, to be honest
yeah,
with you.
man,
This is super
it's a deep
interesting.
one. It's a deep one.
Super, yeah, like that opens up a whole door, but without going super deep into
Too
that,
far there.
that's great. I love it. Without going really deep into that, um, if the nature of all businesses
Yeah,
was purpose led and
yep,
all brands were conscious capitalistic brands,
yep.
are you cool with advertising and mass media if all brands and businesses were conscious?
It's a great question. First of all, I would love to see all businesses embrace the
Right.
principles of conscious capitalism. That would be an important step, regardless of whether it was sufficient or not to protect us from essentially ecosystem collapse. Um, so I would say that would be great. The other thing I would say is, you know, at a functional level, and maybe these are the same thing, but right now I don't think of them as the same thing. Maybe you can correct me here, but our supply chains need to be circular, right? Right now we have a one-way trip in consumerism. You rip the resources out of the ground, you make a product, that product is used, that product is then discarded. It's
Mhm.
never Most of it is never reused. 87% of every piece of clothing that you have ever owned is sitting in a landfill somewhere.
Mhm.
So, if we can make the entire economy circular in that way, maybe, right? That's really important work, figuring out how to make our economy less extractive. And then, I would say the last piece is energy. We have to figure out how to get off of fossil fuels much, much faster than we are. We're addicted to them. You can feel as soon as things get bad, as soon as the prices of fossil fuels go up, people start, reverting to the bad old days. So Germany is firing up their coal plants this year because they've had their gas cut off from Russia. And so as fossil fuels get scarcer and more expensive, it's gonna be even harder to make the
Mm.
transition. And so we need to make the transition soon.
Scary, man.
I know, sorry. I didn't mean to be Mr. Bad Vibes.
No, no, it's the truth. It's the truth. So let's get out of that bad vibe. So then why don't you just drop me a couple of non-bullshitters, some leaders that people would know, these brands that are really doing it right.
Yeah, sure. I mean, this season, I was lucky enough, in fact, this episode just dropped last week, to interview Alan Jope at Unilever. I mean, he is a true believer and a real purpose-led leader, following in the steps of Paul Pullman, who really kicked it off 10 year, more than like 15 years ago at Unilever. They're serious about it. They've taken on some really big, hard problems, and they're not perfect. They have issues still, lots of them, but they're working on them. I spoke with Joey Zwillinger at Allbirds. That's a really interesting company. They're really a materials
Yeah.
science and innovation company, and they're really making great strides around materials in footwear, and doing cool things like as Tesla did, opening up their patents and saying, "Hey, we've created this thing called sweet foam, which we use because it's made out of sugar cane. We wish everybody used sweet foam. Like, here, take it. We created it. We're not trying to lock it down, right?" And so
Right.
that kind of generous behavior on the part of a company that you go, okay, these people really mean it. They're trying to solve some of the big problems in the world.
Love that.
There's a company called Chief, that I really admire, started by two female founders, and they are trying to solve the problem of the lack of female representation at the top of companies, including Fortune 500 companies. So, you know, something like 20% of Fortune 500 CEOs are female, which is insane, and their tenure tends to be shorter at Fortune 500 companies because they face different kinds of pressures and they're measured differently than their male counterparts, and so Chief is trying to address that problem by creating a network for senior female executives, and that's, much needed and very awesome work. So there are lots of them out there. I interviewed the CEO of a company from India called Samonati, and Samonati is trying to help empower smallholder farmers, which are, subsistence farmers almost in India. And there are, hundreds of thousands, millions of these smallholder farmers. And the answer in the US was to buy them all out and have these giant agribusinesses run farming, which is terrible for the world. It's terrible for the soil. It's terrible for us because the food that gets produced is terrible for you.
Yeah,
And in India, Samanati is trying to preserve
that's awesome.
the individual farmers, right? And so that's a super cool business. So they're everywhere, and there are more of them every day, right? It's like that's the inspiring thing, is like it really is happening. Um, I want it to happen faster. That's
Yeah.
I'm
When it
sure you
comes
too, right? You're on this train.
Yeah, when it comes to food, man, America is just awesome at doing the wrong thing.
Incredible,
It's the
right?
worst. It's like
Yeah,
we're literally poisoning our own people.
I
Yeah,
know.
I have one of our clients at Go Global Agency. It's called First Light Farms, and they're from New Zealand, and they're the only one in the world that's 100% grass-fed Wagyu beef, and it's made up with conscious farming practices of all these small farmers that are all stakeholders in the company too. So as the company does well, those farmers do well as well, and they're all using great practices with the land. I mean, it's just like that's what you want,
Yeah,
and the result is a food that's actually better for you.
yeah, that's
And it's
right.
much more sustainable that way, even though it is meat, which is typically seen as like, oh, if meat's not sustainable, there are ways to make it
Yeah, no,
sustainable,
that's right, and,
right? So,
I was listening to actually one of the episodes that you did. I can't remember the guy's name, but he was really knowledgeable about grass-fed beef and,
yeah, that was actually the CEO of that company,
yeah.
Chad. Yeah,
Oh, okay, cool,
yeah.
cool, and, one of the things that he dropped, by the way, he also called out is it pasture-raised eggs? Um, Vital Farms is another company in the raised eggs business that is a really good company. But back to the beef thing,
I'm
the
glad that's what's in my fridge all the time.
oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that's a good company.
yeah.
Um, the I was blown away by the fact that people actually eat less, they consume fewer calories because the food
Oh,
is so energy dense, right? You don't
got
need
it.
as much.
That
That
was a
blew me
different
away. That
episode.
was really cool.
Yeah, that was a different episode. That was great, right? Just about what you just mentioned. Like
Right.
you can eat less of it,
Yeah.
and the energy, how it actually turns into energy in your body, you need less calories
Yeah.
for your
That
body
was
to
really interesting.
operate. That's wild, and you get full faster. And so it ends up being that you end up, getting in better shape too. You don't have to eat as many calories. Man, that was super interesting. Love that.
Yeah.
So I've got a couple of favorite apps. I love being able to sort of hack this if I'm on the shelf buying something, and I use EWG is one of my favorite ones.
What's it
Um,
called?
EWG. So
EWG.
EWG is awesome. It stands for Environmental Working Group. It's so cool. You can either scan the QR or the barcode, or put in
Barcode?
the product name like of the sunscreen, and it'll tell me based on all the ingredients and all the research that exists on the ingredients how good or bad that product is for my body. So
Cool.
that's like one of like what it can do to you, right? And it's got a scale, super cool. And then I've just recently learned about Good on You. Have you heard about that one?
I have heard of Good on You, but I don't
So
know
So this
almost
is
anything
interesting, and
about
that's
them.
for clothes, right? And what was really interesting is that I thought of you because of the whole calling bullshit thing. And there's these um, companies that I've always, for example, Allbirds and
Yeah.
Allo,
Yep.
two companies that came to mind, Allbirds and Allo, that I've always seen as super, very sustainable sort of green companies. And it has them on there as like on a lower scale of like it's a start. They call it it's a start, like they're trying.
Yep.
So it's really interesting. And again, I don't know what it's all based on, but it was just
Yep.
an interesting thing to start thinking about it when you're buying clothes, you're buying something you have no idea, right? You
Yep.
go to the market, you've got a certified organic, 100% grass fed, this and that. Like you've got these stamps. You go buy clothes. There's no stamps out there. There's no
Yep.
stamp that says, that this is either being made by, child labor and with the textile industry, which by the way is like the second worst industry after oil. They
Yeah.
like what?
Highly polluting industry. Incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, wild. So, but anyway, some of those apps had mentioned some things about Allbirds and just interesting. I don't know if you had heard about these apps or anything like that, but cool,
I
cool.
hadn't. I proposed back in the day, this is a while ago, creating an app like that for a couple of clients. So I'm glad they finally exist. That's good.
Super
Another
cool. Yeah.
really interesting company is a company called Genexa. Um, they're in the over-counter medicine business, and they basically started by two dads who started reading medicine labels before they started giving medicine to their kids, and realizing that it was just full of junk, fillers, and the active ingredients were fine, but it's the inactive ingredients. Like it actually takes quite a bit of mass to make, for instance, like a tablet. And all that the
Interesting.
mass is made up of just the cheapest possible stuff that they can lay their hands on, and in some cases it's really quite bad for you. And so Genexa is a clean medicine company where they're trying to clean
Nice.
up the medicine aisle. Super cool.
I love that. I love that. Well, I know we're coming up on our time. I mean, I don't want to hold you tight. Like I thought we were gonna have like a half an hour conversation, and I mean, I could keep talking to you forever. But before I let you go,
Yeah.
Ty, I wanted to ask you a couple more things. So, you know, even if you're a giant company that isn't on the trajectory, is it possible, to change, to bring that change? I know it seems like hard, like you have to move mountains. But for
if
people that
if
are
you're not a big
entrepreneurs,
company.
right? Yeah, people that are working for large companies feel that they have a say within their company because they're leaders or C-level execs, whatever. But how, is there a way to actually reposition large companies to start doing the right thing
You mean from the inside?
from the inside? Yeah.
Well, I think, I would hope that big companies are waking up to the, well, companies of all sizes, right? We're all, if you're a in business, right? A big part of what you're trying to do is get the best talent. And if you want to attract the best young talent in the world today, being purpose led is one of the best ways to do that, right? Because young people really care. They're the ones who are going to inherit the future that corporations are creating today. And they want to hold corporations to account. They want to see corporations doing the right thing. And so I would say, be respectfully vocal inside the company that you're in,
Yeah.
especially if you're a young person, and point out that to the leadership in the company that in order to attract more young, talented people like yourself, the company really should continue to push in the direction of being purpose led. Just remind them. And then if you are
Yeah.
in a situation where you can vote with your feet, if the company ignores you, vote with your feet. Go work someplace else. Go find a company that's either already purpose led or clearly, seriously,
Love
intentfully
that.
going for it, right? Because life's too short, and don't spend your time you know making the world worse. Paul Pullman had a thing that I really like. He said, one of the simple ways to define a consciously capitalist company, or a company that is purpose led, is it's a company that makes money solving the world's problems rather than making them. And
Yeah.
I kind of think that's genius. And I also think, like, all other things being equal, if I had it to do over again, those are the companies I would work exclusively for companies that were doing that,
Yeah.
trying to solve the world's problems, right? And so if you're young today, do that. And you have a more powerful voice than you think.
I love that. That's such good advice. You hear vote with your dollars all the time as consumers to be conscious
Yeah,
consumers. But as a worker, as a laborer, vote with your feet.
yeah,
Go work with, where do you who do you stand with?
yeah,
And make that heard by putting your energy, your intelligence, your creativity into that. I love that. That's
mm.
super cool. Ty, what would you say makes you a successful speaker? You've been speaking. I'll let you go on this one, but what do you think? You've got great audiences. You've got a great stage, and you get to tell these beautiful stories. What do you think makes you a good speaker?
I don't know. I don't know if I am, honestly,
Oh,
but I
oh,
but I would say, if it's anything, it's that I really, I I really don't like, saying anything that I don't believe, right? Like, and I spend a lot of time, you know, before, and this annoys people sometimes because I'm fairly quiet and I speak slowly because it gives me time to think. And so I try only to say things that I really believe. I don't always achieve that, but usually if it's coming out of my mouth, it's something that I really have thought about and I really believe it. And if you can speak with real conviction about whatever it is that you're trying to get across to people, people can feel that, right? They sense
mm-hmm.
it. Um, and they also sense it if you're a bullshitter, I think. And
Right.
so, to the best, sometimes, look, life is complicated. Sometimes you have to get up and say stuff that you don't necessarily totally
Yeah.
believe. Like, I've been in that situation too as a leader, and it's hard, but sometimes, conditions call for it. I just try to avoid those situations as much as possible. I just try to say what I mean and to mean what I say. And it makes life so much easier, right? And it's so much easier to get up in front of a group of people if you're there to tell them something that you really believe in.
Love that. Love that, Ty. So on that note, what are the top two traits that a conscious leader must embody today?
Yeah, I think, the first trait, I think, is a conscious leader, needs to be the chief evangelist of the purpose that your company is trying to
Mm,
serve. This is not a thing that you can push off to your marketing team or your HR team, right? Purpose is not marketing. It's not a message. It's an operating system. It's a way of being in the world. It's a set of activities. And so
amen.
it has to flow from the top. The CEO has to believe it and has to evangelize for it. Because if you don't believe it as the CEO, and live it, then nobody else is going to buy it. Right. So that's the first. Second is, make sure that your organization knows what to do with the purpose, right? Because if people don't know what to do with it in their area of the company, it'll get carved in a wall somewhere and forgotten about. It has to be a tool that is used for action and activity throughout the company. And so spending the time to help everyone inside the company know what to do with it in their area of the business is really important, so that there's no ambiguity about how it affects the way we think about sales, how it affects the way we think about our HR policies, what we celebrate, what we reward, at the company, how it affects, our product development, what kind of products we do develop and what kind of products we would never develop. Like, everyone in the company needs to understand what to do with it, including the marketing team, right? It's not that it can't be used by marketing. It should
Right.
be really, really useful for marketing, but it's
Yeah.
just not exclusively a thing that you talk about, right?
Right. Right. Got it. Love that. Thank you so much, Ty. People will be able to reach you and the links that are in the notes. Thank you again for being on. And you're truly a conscious leader yourself. Very, very inspiring. So keep doing you, Ty. Thank you so much for being on today.
Sebastian, thanks for having me. I had a great time. This was a great conversation.
Thank you. Hey guys, I really hope you enjoyed that episode. You know, it takes a lot to put these things together, but I truly love doing it. If you enjoyed this episode or the show in general, and you listen to it on audio podcast, please take some time to give it a review. It would really mean a lot to me. And if you watch the video, please go ahead and just click subscribe and share it with somebody that you think would like it. It would really mean the world to me, and it helps keep the show alive. Visit sebastiannaum.com for more content and follow me on Instagram at sebnaum. That's SEBNAUM. Thanks again for spending your time with me. I know it is valuable. I hope you have a great rest of the day and week. Till next time.